Hey there guys, it is Dungeon Master Mark, and you guys have been asking for it, and we are doing today a review of the new Horror Adventures book through Paizo for Pathfinder. So first of all, I gotta say, I picked this up at Gen Con over the weekend, and I think for those of you who are looking for horror-related games, kind of like my Dark City game, you guys are gonna find this really, really interesting and a good value. Before we get started, like I said, I should say this book's going to be a little bit different from like your Ultimate Intrigue, like your Ultimate Magic, Ultimate Combat books, where this is going to be geared just for basically just creating a horror campaign itself. So there's plenty of information you can use in this for non-horror campaigns, but to get the most bang out of your value for this, that is going to be primarily what it's used for. It does have some new archetypes, new feats, new themes, new spells, and some optional rules that you can use for non-horror related campaigns. But this is definitely geared for that very, very specific niche for those who want to run a campaign with that kind of old school Ravenloft feeling to it. So for those of you like me who love Ravenloft, you miss those really gritty, dark horror games, you're going to love it. So let's go ahead and get into it. It's a 255-page hardback book. So as you can tell, obviously the artwork is beautiful. It is the same style hardback as all the other Paizo books, so bound very, very nicely. Very, very sturdy. The market price, of course, is the $44.99. And it is 3.5 open gaming license compatible, of course. So let's go ahead and crack it open, and let's go ahead and take a look. So table content wise, like I said, it's going to go over a bunch of different things, some of how different ways of creating characters geared just towards horror campaigns, some of your different archetypes and class options, your feats, your spells, optional horror rules, which we'll go over a little bit more, some horror related magic items, and of course you have about 8 different optional bestiary creatures that are horror related, in case you want to add those to your campaign. So the first thing we're going to go over for the most part is going to be what they are considered conversions or corruptions. So what a corruption is in the old Ravenloft campaign settings you would have where, say, your person was attacked by, say, in this case, a ghoul. And they got cured, but maybe they got tainted by the ghoul. So maybe they all of a sudden, had claws, or they had a, horrible, horrible stench to them, something of that nature. So what a corruption is going to be is where they've started progressing towards being a ghoul, and then it stopped. So this optional rule, what's going to be is to where if they continue being corrupted, they can gain new kind of manifestations of those powers. So in this case, for the ghoul one, so basically, like I said, once you've been corrupted by the ghoul itself, so you have different types of stages. You have stage 1, stage 2, and the stage 3 where you basically become an NPC, you basically become a ghoul. So the first stage, you might get a manifestation, like say you have a brain eater. So if your creature has the, somehow, like I said, if he is around a brain, or if he is, in combat and there's a brain available, he will have an urge to eat that particular brain of the dying or helpless creature. And if he does, say he'll get a +2 inside all skill checks, something like that for 1 hour if he does. Corpse armor, where you get a +2 bonus to your natural armor. You can have a disease bite, gnashing bite. Like this one here, for instance, is greater paralysis. So if your character scratches someone, he'll be able to paralyze them just like a ghoul from having that ability. You have where they could grow claws, stench of the grave, just like a ghoul or a ghast. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Like I said, you can make it to where they only get to stage 1, and maybe the character is really, really, really careful not to, like I said, if they encounter ghouls, next time they might run away. The other interesting thing you can do that is you can do where, like, say, maybe all the members of the party have different types of corruptions, or maybe they get those corruptions along the way. Now, they added a lot of different types of corruptions, like the deep ones, where maybe you've been afflicted by Darrow, or something of that nature. Maybe an Aboleth, you have Hellbound, you have Lich, you have Lycanthropy, which I'll show you guys a couple. Obviously, the artwork in the book is immaculate, just like almost all of the Pathfinder books. Another one I was going to tell you guys about was the Hive, where it's more like insect-like. So when I read this chapter, I was thinking kind of like the movie Mimic from a long, long time ago, where the one gentleman slowly starts turning into like an insect-like creature. And of course, the Lich, where you're slowly turning into a Lich. You know, you become kind of emaciated, and then you start getting a boost to your necromantic effects, and then maybe you get like a bleak aura around your guy. And you suddenly stop aging. Now, the lycanthropy is probably my favorite. So, like I said, some of the abilities like animalistic health. Anytime you shift forms, you gain a +2 to your constitution. Lasts as long as you're in your shifted form. Feral senses. Lycanthropic empathy. So anytime you're around creatures of that type, like say if you're a werewolf, or if you're tainted with werewolves, like I said, you can read kind of the moods of wolves. Maybe you can even speak with them. Silver allergy. So say if your guy is, say, a cleric. So you got bit by a werewolf, and you got healed, but maybe you're still allergic to silver itself, so it slowly burns your skin. So there's a lot of interesting kind of taints that you can get through being using these catalysts or these corruptions. Now the neat thing is, like I said, some of them are very, very beneficial. Some of them are less so, and they're more of an actual taint. So primarily, like I said, when you do that, you want to make sure the character takes one beneficial and one non-beneficial. That way, like I said, they're getting kind of a good and a positive and a negative, many of those abilities that they gain. You have Possessed, Promethean, Shadowbound, which I love the artwork there of the halfling or the gnome that's all kind of grayed out, eyes all solid black. Vampirism, so maybe you got healed of being a vampire. Next up, they have some optional race traits. Pardon me, guys. There's some pretty interesting ones. Like I said, all of these are horror-related. So you have the elf, where, you know, maybe some people believe they're creepy because they're kind of long and slender, if you're thinking like the Slender Man type thing. Yeah, the one I thought was interesting was for halflings, a creepy doll, where the doll's eyes are kind of glassy and the skin's porcelain, so it almost makes it look like a living doll. So if you remember some of the old Ravenloft adventures, where there'd be like the living dolls that were kind of like the little Chucky murderers, I thought that was definitely a really, really interesting one. They just believe halfling is a doll similar to Free's universal ability without being able to take 20. In addition, they take no size penalty on intimidate checks on larger creatures. So, like I said, you could definitely see where you can have a Chucky type villain who's a halfling who looks like a doll, but it's actually just like a serial killer. So definitely some interesting ideas, not only for the party, but also to use for kind of the antagonist as well. So we're actually going to go ahead and skip ahead. Like I said, most of this, what we're skipping through, is going to be different class features, like the archetypes. Pardon me. There are literally dozens of different archetypes. You have the Death Druid, which is kind of like the Death antagonist Druid, who maybe they're, you know, they believe that death is that natural portion of that cycle. You have the Hexenhammer, the Living Gormier, Mesmerist. Now there is a neat one I want to show you guys real quick. Don't want to make this video too awful long, but this one will definitely be neat. Now the Vigilante class is one of the newer classes that comes out, that's just came out, I should say, and they made a very neat NPC archetype called the Serial Killer. So the Vigilante normally has two personas. They have like the local persona, where like maybe it's the town mayor, and the second persona is kind of like a superhero or something of that nature. Well, this one is the serial killer archetype. So you might have this nice, sweet little girl who works down at the local tavern, the local pub, and in her free time, she's a serial killer. So at 4th level, the serial killer gains the steady target ability of Slayer 3 levels lower. So, you know, she can basically get death attacks, kind of like a sneak attack or death attack against people. So very, very good way to make yourself very lethal antagonist in your campaign. And of course, it's going to be extremely hard for the party to find out who it is. With, you know, I mean, simple bluff checks, things of that nature, are just basically not going to help the party. So they're going to definitely have to do a lot of role-playing and a lot of searching to find out who the antagonist is. And then you have a couple different witch archetypes, and then you have your feats. plenty of different feats. You have combat styles. You have one's abilities that, instead of crafting, allows you to do flesh warping, which we're going to get into that a little bit later. Different types of spell feats. Then you have like lifeless gaze, which you gain a bonus against emotions on those who read your mind or fail to impress you. Gain these shaken condition. So a lot of different and pretty interesting feats. Some of these are going to be more for the party. Some of them are definitely going to be more towards the antagonist or the enemies you're going to fight. And then this just goes over some of the feats, and then of course spells. Lots and lots of spells. I would say there's probably about 30 pages of spells. You have everything from, there's one called like a wall of flesh, so it's literally like a big giant corpse wall. You have one where you can graft like limbs and stuff like that to your body for like a certain amount of rounds. So maybe you're fighting a creature that has wings and you cut off its wings. You are literally able to graft those using a spell onto your body for a certain number of rounds. So that's something that can kind of be used for the antagonist, where they can, graft someone else's limbs onto their body, or as the party, like I said, something like that can definitely come in handy as well. So a lot of interesting things in this section. Next thing we're going to go on to is flesh warping, which I was telling you guys about earlier. If you remember, some of the older Pathfinder books told about how the Drow and some of the Aboleths and that would do what's called flesh warping, which is where they would basically strip flesh and bone from a living creature, like a paralyzed creature, and they would transform that onto a new creature. And that's how things like Driders were made, things like owlbears, and basically this magical process is basically kind of transmutes or transforms creatures into new creatures. So this book is the first one that really goes into a lot of details and different ways that they can flesh warp. So obviously this is probably not going to be much of use to the players, but as a GM you can definitely create some really creepy and really, really scary creatures. So the one thing is like camouflage flesh. So the creature gains a stealth ability, whether or not it has cover or concealment. You can give the creature claws, which that'll have like different prices of different abilities. And it's going to have basically kind of like a craft check on how you're going to go from having, like I said, the caster or the flesh warper create that. So for instance, right here it shows a Drider, CR7, costs 1,500 gold pieces, which the creation is DC 24, it takes approximately 8 days. Creatures 1 drow with at least 6 class levels, 1 giant spider. So that's basically kind of like creating a potion, except for this mad scientist is creating basically a Drider. Now, if you want to get even crazier than that, like I said, you can create basically the same creature. Take out the drow, maybe put a bugbear, then the bottom half's a giant scorpion. So you can definitely create some really, really crazy creatures just to fight your party. Or you can take, especially if your antagonist of your campaign is maybe some, Dr. Frankenstein, you can come up with some really, really crazy things that are geared just towards particular characters. And then you got stinging tails, retractable spines, poison fangs, all types of interesting things like that. And then you have different types of mutations they can add. So we'll just say lidless eyes. The creature's eyes become saucer-like and lidless. Creature's noseless, has tumors all across his bodies. So you can definitely come up with new ways to scare the party, because they're not going to have any idea what it is that they're fighting. And we're just going to step a little bit back towards the back there. One thing I do like about this book is they list different ways to kind of bring more horror to your storytelling. I went over this in a previous video a long time ago, was how to kind of work horror into your games. One thing, obviously, your music, you can find kind of the creepy organ music, things like that to add. One thing they call it the secret of the bluff. Like I said, you can pass notes to your players. If there's a particular player that maybe that character is the only one that notices that there's a rat in the center of the room that's didn't scurry off, it's just staring at you, maybe you can pass a note to that player letting them know that. Another thing it talks about is what they call the bluff. So what that is one thing I've done in the past is, if a player finds something no one else found, I will pull them aside and I'll let them know, or I'll write them a note. I'll pass that to them. Now, this is what they call the bluff. So what they're going to do is, maybe you pull that, the person that you're bluffing, you're going to pull them out of the room and you're just going to let them know something. Not anything completely different from the game that anyone else saw, but you might tell them that maybe, that they looked in the mirror and their character has black hair, but maybe they see that it's blonde hair. So the mirror to them looks different than anyone else, okay? So when they come back in the room, the party's going to be wondering what happened. Did that person find something, that they didn't? What exactly is going on? Now, you can tell that person not to tell anyone else. Or, maybe they tell the party and the rest of the party just doesn't believe them. And when it gets even more interesting, like I said, if you tell one player one thing and you tell one player something else. So they're not sure if that other person is maybe compromised or they're possessed or what's going on. Another thing it talks about is death and bargaining. So this one's called the doppelganger. Obviously, sometimes players die and they may come back. So in this case, inform the PC that he barely survived, only because he was replaced by a shape-shifting creature at some point in the past. He is now playing a monster with the exact same stats as his character. When he sees an opportunity moment, he should attack or otherwise betray the party to the villain. So let's say, the party had to leave this one member behind and they had to flee. Now, they don't know it, but this member of the party has actually been replaced by a doppelganger, maybe with fighter levels or sorcerer levels or whatever. Now, he has his own goal now to betray the party at some point. So definitely different ways you can throw things in there. Maybe the player was killed in combat and now he stands before a devil, grim reaper, or something worse. And they offer to return the PC to life, but it comes with a demand of service later. They might have to do something for that demon or that devil. So that's something up to the GM. Obviously, it's going to be very, very creepy if the fighter in the party dies, and then all of a sudden at the end of combat, boom, he's back to life. Maybe even fully healed, just to make it even more creepy. So, like I said, lots of different and interesting ideas. It also goes into how about different ways to use lighting, music, different ways to use game space. It does have a couple chapters where it talks about different movies and books in that you can definitely read to get the feel of different types of campaigns depending on how you're wanting to customize your campaign. And then rules improvisation, it gives you some interesting rules about like if a monster or character is burned at the stake, if they're killed by a guillotine or hanging. And then the one last thing I wanted to go over, because this video is getting a little long, I think it's almost at 18 minutes now, is different types of custom magic items. So these are all obviously horror related. This one's a hangman's noose. So it's a +1 whip made from the hemp that was once served as a hangman's noose. As a standard action, they can attempt a combat maneuver check to wrap the whip around the victim or creature's neck. If it succeeds, the victim can't move outside the whip. And also it starts a reposition or basically a grapple to start choking the victim. And at that point, obviously, the victim has 1d6 rounds, and then, after they can't hold their breath any longer, they're suffocating. So, there's some other ones like a vampiric greater ring, a sacrificial dagger. Let's see, there's a murderer's machete, a chitin ring, many-eyed staff, screaming blade. There's just some really, really, really interesting things. And of course, some of the artwork it'll show you in the book is just ridiculously amazing as well. And then I'll tell you about magic item possession. Maybe the party finds a magic item that possesses one of the characters. And of course, the rest of the party might not even know about it. And then you have your horror monsters, like the Dread Lord. That doesn't sound like anything from Ravenloft, does it? Incalculable Stalker, Chitin Apostle, basically living artwork, living canvases. So, and then, we don't need to look at that. And this is the one I was telling you guys earlier about different inspirations. It breaks it down into different types of movies and books and that you can roll. Like this is just on body horror, cosmic horror, dark fantasy, gothic horror, like The Bride of Frankenstein, Crimson Peak, the original Dracula, Interview with a Vampire. So like I said, it definitely gives you, more than just kind of stat information. They kind of went all out. Like I said, they even made a list of movies and books that you might want to read to kind of get you in the mood for writing for your campaign, which I can definitely appreciate that. Overall, like I said, I got to give this book 2 thumbs up. Paizo did a really, really good job. It does give a lot of information just towards making a horror campaign or horror adventures. So I think they really, really hit the spot on this book. Obviously, there's always going to be a lot of GMs who don't want any more fluff, which if that's the case, I completely understand. This would be a good book for you still to buy just to use the information for your evil NPCs. Maybe give them special archetypes, special feats. If you're like me and you like core rule-only games, like I said, I'm still planning on using a lot of information in this for evil NPCs for my Dark City game when we start that back up. So definitely keep an eye out for this book. Like I said, 2 thumbs up on my end. If you guys have any questions, any comments, if you want to see more information, please let me know. I'm going to be starting a couple new video series here in the next couple days on how to wire LEDs into some gaming train. And I've got a couple other books I'm going to be doing reviews on as well. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you all later. Bye-bye.